Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For the last 3 days, India has been following the horror story of Aaftab and Shraddha. A love story, the way it started and ended in a macabre murder of Shraddha. Shraddha, who was cut into 35 pieces by Aaftab, or so it is believed. It's no doubt that Aaftab was living a lie. He misled Shraddha, forged documents and later chopped her and disposed of her body. The case is turning out to be murkier day by day and new twists and turns are emerging. The Delhi cops are in a huddle and are trying to connect the dots, but probably not everything is going in their favor. One question that is bothering just about everyone is, how can this macabre murder go unnoticed for 6 months, and that too in the national capital of India? There are many loopholes when it comes to the Mehrauli butchery. As per Delhi police sources, Aaftab used a 1.5 feet cleaver to chop off the body parts, but the problem for the police is that it is still to be found. The murder weapon has not been recovered. The cops are citing Aaftab's admission during the interrogation that Shraddha's liver and intestines were minced and disposed of first. But Aaftab has wiped out the traces of DNA by using chemicals. However, some blood stains have been collected and are undergoing tests from his kitchen. Delhi police sources also claim that Aaftab has admitted that he killed Shraddha, but what if he changes his statement in front of a magistrate or the courts? Delhi police claim Shraddha's body was chopped into 35 pieces. So far, the cops have only been able to locate 12 to 13 parts which need to be tested for DNA on whether they were Shraddha's body parts or just some random animals, part of a mutilated body. Racing against time, the Delhi cops are banking on narco-analysis test because they feel Aaftab is misleading them and the probe. Take a look at this report.
श्रद्धा मर्डर केस में अब जांच तेज हो गई है। अब दिल्ली पुलिस की टीम लगातार इस बात की पड़ताल कर रही है कि आखिर जो आफताब ने शव के टुकड़े किए थे, उन टुकड़ों को इस मेहरौली के जंगल में किस किस जगह पे रखा था। इसके साथ साथ जिस औजार की बात कही जा रही है, जो मर्डर वेपन था, उसको उसने कहां छुपा के रखा था। जरा इस जंगल की दूसरी तरफ आप नजर डालिए, आपको एक तालाब नुमा एक जंगल भी दिखेगा जिसके अंदर पानी पूरा भरा हुआ है। ऐसे में सवाल यह भी है कि क्या आफताब ने इन लाश के टुकड़ों को इस पानी के अंदर डाल दिया होगा। तो ऐसे में यह कैसे पता चलेगा कि लाश के टुकड़े कहां हैं, और यहां से उन टुकड़ों को बरामद करना बेहद ही मुश्किल काम होने वाला है।
Even he made his friend a witness in the Vasai flat agreement document without informing him, which reveals his dubious intent. Listen in to what his friend said.
बात इस रेंट एग्रीमेंट की है और जहां पर मेरा नाम मेंशन है उस बारे में मुझे कुछ नॉलेज नहीं है। उनके पास मेरा नंबर था।
आपको कभी बताया नहीं कि आपका नंबर या नाम किसी एग्रीमेंट में एज अ विटनेस, एज अ टेनेंट विटनेस दे रहे हैं?
जी नहीं। अभी मैं जब उसके घर पे जाया करता था तो श्रद्धा को वहां पर देखा है मैंने। श्रद्धा मेरी फ्रेंड नहीं थी, वो उसके साथ में थी और मैं इसका फ्रेंड था। मेरा जो मोस्टली बात होती थी वो आफताब के साथ में होती थी। इन जनरल वो फ्रेंडली नेचर के थे, अच्छा नेचर था उनका, शांत था। मैं सरप्राइज हुआ ये देख के और शॉक भी लगा मुझे इस चीज का कि ये क्या हो गया, क्योंकि वो नेचर वैसा उसका नहीं था।
While Aaftab and his statement can really not be clinching evidence as far as the police is concerned, just visualize the state of Shraddha's father. Shraddha's father, who doesn't know what really happened to his daughter and is losing his trust in the police probe. He has claimed that the Maharashtra cops, instead of giving thrust to the investigation, cited jurisdiction and the place of murder to wash their hands off and hand the probe over to Delhi police. Listen in to Shraddha's father.
तो दिल्ली पुलिस की जो जांच है सर, आप उससे संतुष्ट हैं? महाराष्ट्र पुलिस ने क्या एक्शन लिया था सर स्टार्टिंग में?
उन्होंने खाली इन्वेस्टिगेशन किया।
अच्छा।
हाँ, जो पुलिस की तरफ से जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन होता है, सीडीआर निकाल के कोशिश की, लेकिन वो 1 महीने से भी ज्यादा लग गया, लेकिन उन्होंने कुछ फाइनल रिजल्ट नहीं निकाला। तो उसके बाद उन्होंने फिर बोले कि ये लास्ट लोकेशन श्रद्धा का दिल्ली में दिख रहा है, तो इसलिए हम लोग शायद दिल्ली में ट्रांसफर करेंगे। तो मैंने बोला आप क्यों नहीं कर सकते ये सब काम? तो बोले नहीं, वो उनके लिए इजी हो जाएगा।
So the legitimate question we are asking on the NewsHour tonight: do the men in khaki have a solid case against Aaftab, or is he going to get away? That's the question and the debate. Justice for Shraddha, that's the hashtag and the debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the NewsHour at 9. Debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
And joining me on the debate tonight, Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate, PK Jain, former additional DGP Maharashtra, Pratibha Prahlad, renowned artist and culture specialist, Shashikant, former DGP of Punjab, Sarthak Nayak, lawyer. But my first question goes to Mr. Sidharth Luthra, senior advocate and ace criminal lawyer. Sidharth Luthra, my question to you is that a crime of this nature happens in the national capital, and not just that, you know, a dead body cut into several pieces, 35 pieces, stored in a refrigerator at home, and just nobody knows. Nobody knows. The entire site is cleaned up, the murder weapon not found, the skull of the deceased not found as yet. A statement, of course, being called a confession by the so-called killer. Is that going to be enough to nail the role of Aaftab, Mr. Sidharth Luthra?
That's absolutely right, Navika. Such a confession is not enough. In fact, there are two important things which I wanted to just highlight. If the father made a complaint, Bombay police, even if they felt they didn't have jurisdiction, should have registered a 0 FIR and then immediately transferred it to Delhi police. So far as this case is concerned, the confession, the narco-analysis test is not really going to be evidence in court, but enough, it's going to give leads to the police. What the police needs to do in this case is to go back and start reconstructing the events, find what are the witnesses, which witnesses will place them last together, the young lady and the young man, and try and scientifically evaluate the refrigerator. If the murder weapon is found, great. If the parts of the body are found, wonderful. But even if they're not, that does not mean it's a hopeless case. There can be other circumstantial evidence, and the fact that the body is not found is not going to necessarily demolish the case. But what it needs is sensitive, scientific, logical, coherent investigation, and not grandstanding. So this release of the confession, the talk of narco-analysis, I would call this grandstanding, because eventually what is going to make a difference in this case between a just result and a shoddy investigation is going to be an attempt to have a scientific, coherent investigation, and that is what is important in this case. So I would say early days, nothing is lost, and I'm hopeful that if the Delhi police performs the way it had done in the Nirbhay case, I'm sure you'll have a logical and a coherent result.
But Mr. Sidharth Luthra, it's a case of its own kind, unless you compare this to Anupama Gulati case in Dehradun, where she had been cut into 72 pieces. I mean, does this look like a sociopath, a man, who has a psychological, mind to be able to cut a body into 35 pieces, store it in a fridge at home and live there and behave normally for over 6 months? And do you think the lapse of time can actually take away a lot of evidence that this case may need in a court of law?
So, two answers. This is not the first time you have incidents where the disposal of the dead body has been done. If you remember the Tandoor case, Sushil Sharma, I think the name was, where the lady was killed and then chopped into pieces and burnt in a tandoor. But the point in all these cases needs to be remembered is that while some parts of the evidence are lost, for example, you talked about the fridge. Now there is DNA, there's RT-DNA, there's a lot more that can be found. There will be some evidence will be lost by lapse of time. For example, messages are retained for 3 months unless you can get the service providers to pull up new messages. But there is enough if logically and coherently looked for, and today, while delay is always beneficial to the accused in some cases, in such a case it isn't. Now, to answer your last question, whether the man is a psychopath, frankly, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist to be able to answer that. But remember one thing, there are two parts. One is the actual offense, that is how the lady was killed. And the second part is going to be how the body was sought to be disposed of. Now, the manner in which the killing and the disposal took place, disposal is a separate offense that is triable separately, punishable separately. So if he has to be punished, he'll be punished for both. Secondly, and we must keep this in mind, that the nature of the entire crime and the disposal will have a great bearing on the nature of sentence that is to be imposed. And that's something which has to be kept in mind. So I would say early days yet, and we should hold on to see what developments take place in the investigation.
Well, so let me ask Mr. Sarthak Naik. Sarthak Naik, do you think the men in khaki have a solid case? At the moment, prima facie, what is in public domain, do you think they have a rock-solid case to try and nail Aaftab?
Listen, first of all, let me tell you, Navika, this case is one of the most dastardly, diabolic, semi-barbaric, brutal and inhuman case, I think, in the history of independent India, if you compare it with some other cases, which has completely shocked the collective conscience of the society. As far as this case is concerned, normally in criminal cases, there is no direct evidence in case of murder case. Therefore, you have to look for circumstantial evidence. Now, all this narco-analysis test, taking him to that jungle, etc., are corroborative piece of evidences. You have to look into the primary piece of evidences first. I think the police officers from the very beginning should have looked into 4 angles of the investigation. Number one, they should have looked into the last scene theory, which was being suggested by senior advocate Mr. Luthra, the extrajudicial confession part, the leading to discovery part, and the protection of the crime scene. Quickly, I would like to sum it up. Last scene theory means the time gap between the point of time when the deceased and the accused were last seen together. Some people might have seen them. The police officer still now has not interrogated them. So when Shraddha was last seen with Aaftab, 2-3 people might have seen them. That is a very crucial piece of evidence. Number 2, extrajudicial confession. Aaftab, after the commission of the crime, might have met several people. And there is a chance that he might have confessed about the commission of the crime to somebody. Those people also needs to be interrogated if at all he has confessed. Third and the most crucial part is that when you are leading to discovery part, which is hit under section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act, statement before police has no evidentiary value. Statement before police officer in custody also doesn't have any evidentiary value. Therefore, police officers should investigate in such a manner that they should lead and recover that weapon of offense, not the dead body. Dead body is a part that is acceptable. You have to find out the weapon of the offense, then it is hit under section 27 and is admissible as a piece of evidence. Therefore, I believe that these angles needs to be investigated first. Then otherwise what will happen, Navika, in this country, normally 50-60 witnesses will come into play. Half of them will be broken in cross-examination. They will turn hostile. Trial will continue for 20 years and all will be acquitted. This is a case where high standards from the Delhi police is expected. And as Mr. Luthra said, these are early stage. These angles needs to be investigated. Well, and it should not be, we should not play to the gallery, go and do press conferences, release part evidence in media, call media to the crime scene. These has to be avoided. The case has to be done on the basis of clinching and credible evidence.
But is there clinching and credible evidence as of now, Sanjay Hegde? Because, the crime scene in itself has been washed by chemicals, acid, what have you. The fact is that for nearly 6 months, the body was stored inside. There were other people coming in. He was spending time, as far as what we've learned from our sources. There are digital footprints which will be looked at, but essentially as of now most of the things seem to be relying on his own statement, which is under 161 of the CRPC. Now 161 is not admissible in a court of law. And what if Aaftab changes his statement? Where do we stand on this case as far as looking forward to a conviction of such a heinous crime is concerned?
Well, catching the accused is the least of the police problems. It's building a solid case afterwards, which is hard, boring work. So first and foremost, you have to prove that a crime was committed. That is, you do not have what is called the corpus delicti, or you do not have the body. You have certain parts which are alleged to be that of the body. That confirmation has to yet come from the forensic science laboratory. The lady's DNA would be present in the room, but admittedly she was living there, so her DNA could be there. But that the murder did take place the way it is alleged, and that the body was disposed of the way it is stated, all those steps, as Sidharth has correctly told you, would have to be reconstructed, and whatever is the supporting evidence would have to be marshaled. Now, you earlier said that you could not recollect a similar case. To my mind, a case that I had done in the Supreme Court does fit in reasonably. This was the Swami Shraddhananda case, where a man married an already married woman. He got her to divorce from the first husband. This was in Bangalore. He stayed with her. She was a very wealthy woman. Then he one day put sleeping pills in her coffee, buried her alive. Pratibha Prahlad might remember it. He got her buried alive in that same home, and he continued to remain there. We are not very sure whether the lady had actually died before she was buried, or whether she was clawing at the coffin. So the Bangalore police behaved exactly the way that the Bombay police did. In the beginning, when her estranged daughter went looking for her and told the police that there's something funny which has gone on, they tried to cover it up. Then finally, when they apprehended the man, he pointed out where the body was buried. Everything was videographed. This will become a Netflix episode soon. So all that was recovered. But they built a case very logically. They found out who the carpenter was who had built that coffin. The carpenter then corroborated. And then a case was built, and ultimately, not only was he convicted, but that is now the leading case on life imprisonment for the rest of your life. Can be given as an alternative to the death sentence. That's what the Supreme Court held in Swami Shraddhananda's case. So there are cases and cases, one more gruesome than the other. But irrespective of how gruesome, irrespective of a confession to the police, each of those cases has to be strictly proved in a court of law according to the Evidence Act, and that takes a lot of hard work.
So the question here is, Sanjay Hegde, from what you've heard, do you think that kind of evidence exists as of now, or have we lost vital time? It's a simple question.
No. Time has obviously been lost. Time, you weren't even aware that the lady had died. Time has been lost. Thereafter, what can you recover? Can you recover, say, if there were blood stains inside a fridge, something which eluded cleaning, the cleaning device, and you could say, you could identify through DNA, through the DNA of the parents, that this was indeed the lady's blood, then yes, that would be a very important circumstance. So equally, who was the last person who saw it together? What was the nature of the mobile phone activity? When did she last use her mobile? She used to call a lot of people.
Fair point, but
But Sidharth is right that often this evidence is also the mobile phone companies don't keep for more than 3 months.
Yeah, and this case, the body was hidden for more than that period of time. And Sidharth, I want to then come back to the question on the recent case where the Chawla convicts walked free. The proper identification parade before the accused was not done before the eyewitnesses. The eyewitnesses themselves could not identify the accused with conviction. The court did not rule out the possibility of samples collected being tampered. The forensic findings were not conclusive. What if all of this happens and we can't get justice for Shraddha in this case? My question to you is, so far what we have seen and what we have got, do you think justice for Shraddha is possible in the manner that the society would want it?
Yes, of course. In fact, I must tell you, we've come a long way from those cases. Today, there is parts of DNA which we inherit through our mothers, which can be found even on articles which are washed, which are chemically treated. Those traces can be found. So in forensics, there has been improvement over the last 2 decades, which are phenomenal. And today, it is possible to actually get evidence from places where it is sought to be destroyed or tampered. That's the most important lesson we must remember between the past and now. The second thing is, as I said even earlier, I think there will be justice possible for the lady. And I must add, whether Akash is the person who is justifiably accused, or there is somebody else, or there are other persons involved with him, the electronic phone, every phone that we use is like a tracking device on us. I'm confident that if it is done properly, there is no reason why a just conclusion should not be found. Having said that, you pointed out the earlier case. Now, let's understand this. The law and scientific methods exist, but there is no justification for a shoddy investigation by any agency. If you have a slipshod investigation, if you pick up witnesses and just off the shelf, so to speak, off the street, if you don't maintain a chain of evidence, there are rules in this regard which go back to 100-odd years as to how chain of evidence is to be maintained. We have wonderful forensic labs. They're a little hard-pressed for time, but they exist in this country, including in the CBI and including for the DNA labs in Hyderabad. There is no reason why a just conclusion will not be achieved.
Well, let me get in Pratibha Prahlad. Pratibha Prahlad, India is shocked by the manner in which this entire murder has come to light. The fact that a girl leaves her family, comes to live in with her boyfriend is something that might be happening, next door to you. And then such a brutal murder, and the fact that it isn't discovered for 6 months is so shocking that you can't even begin to believe it. But not just the fact that the body was stored in a refrigerator, it was cut into 35 pieces, the parts of the body were distributed in terms of the disposal. When you hear this case, what do you think? I mean, it's going to take the police so much time first to get the evidence together, and if they can, to prove this in a court of law. That does it give you the confidence that justice for Shraddha will really be delivered?
Navika, before I get into the case on the police and how they handle this case, I would like to tell all the women out there, young women out there, who are either married or in live-in relationships, that the most vulnerable among them are those that don't keep in touch with their parents or their friends or have a social kind of a life on a regular basis. So, when I read about this girl and the fact that she left home to Mumbai in search of a job and then lived with this boy and then moved to Delhi after her mother's death did not inform anybody except a few friends that she moved to Delhi. And her father was unaware whether she was in Delhi or in Bangalore, and he was not even in touch with her. See, then she becomes very, very, very vulnerable, especially if she's living with a psychopath, like obviously this boy was, the murderer, her boyfriend. So, these kinds of dysfunctional relationships, these kinds of people who have some mental issues, they are dysfunctional, they don't know how to, deal with their problems, they kind of then take their rage out on the most vulnerable, and that being their live-in partner, who does not have any sort of a relationship with the outside world, be it family or friends or society. Having said this, 6 months for someone to discover that a young girl is dead is really a terrible thing to confront in our daily lives, because we would like to believe that if a murder happens, that within 24 hours people are aware that this person is missing and a missing complaint is filed as per SOP, and that the police share information with wherever the girl was last seen. Telephone numbers are available with friends, with families, and these days of electronic age, digital age, people can trace phone calls, where they are, where are these people, when was the last call, all these eminent lawyers on your panel we're talking about, the many types of evidences that the police needs to collect to be able to place before court to get this guy, this boy, indicted. But my worry here is as to why the police don't share information, why they don't talk to each other immediately. Why don't they think that when a parent or a friend or a neighbor files a complaint that someone is missing, they don't get into action right away? I mean, why do they take so long? Why this delay in filing an FIR? Why this delay in sharing information with the police of a different state and trying to find out what happened to this person? Their lackadaisical approach is what happens. I mean, is what watches up these kinds of cases, and many have gone scot-free. You know that, I know that. I do remember the Bangalore case, Sanjay ji. I also remember this Tandoor murder case. I was very young then when I first came to Delhi, and we were horrified. For months and months and months, we had nightmares about how a woman's body could be chopped up and put in a tandoor, to erase evidence of murder. So, and that man, I think, who did it was also a politician at that time. This boy obviously is deranged, obviously a psychopath, and I really, really hope that, as Mr. Luthra said, that there is enough evidence that the police can, build a case on, and that they will present a solid case before the court of law, and that their evidence holds, testimony in the court of law, and that this boy can be indicted for a life sentence, or, of course, the father is asking for death penalty.
But when? Before I take that question to Mr. Shashikant and Mr. PK Jain, I want to get in Sidharth Luthra, who's just with us for a few more minutes. Sidharth Luthra, you wanted to add to your earlier points.
Navika, just to add to what Pratibha is saying, one of the dangers of the anonymity of big city living is exactly this. If you are isolated, or you choose to isolate yourself from your friends and family and live around a relationship which appears to be abusive in this case, then you expose yourself to a lot more danger. After all, Bombay police, the father reached out fine, but Delhi police would not be aware till information reaches to them, and only then can they act. So today, in our daily life, if we are not in touch with our friends, our neighbors, a social circle, how will anybody know you've gone missing? And that is the danger of big city living. That is the danger of anonymity. And as Pratibha said, you then expose yourself to not just people in a live-in relationship, but a lot of people who are out there who have violent tendencies, and you expose yourself to danger.
Well,
that's what
while I
want to
understand
really
what
close
you and
to.
Pratibha are trying to say, I somehow don't feel comfortable about blaming Shraddha at this point, because she's not here to recount her experiences of why she was what she was. Was there a reason? Was she being kept away forcibly from being in touch with her friends and family? We don't know that yet. And that's why, Mr. Shashikant, I want to ask you, so far from what we've heard from the police, they found maybe 12 to 13 pieces or parts of the body. I mean, I really do get goosebumps when I'm describing it in this manner. Out of the 35 parts. And in some places it is even said we don't know till the forensic analysis is done whether this is parts of Shraddha's body or whether it is an animal's remains. The skull hasn't been found. The murder weapon hasn't been found. Her phone hasn't been found, which may have a lot of material. And given the fact that phone companies may not have kept messages beyond 3 months, do you think just a 161 CRPC admission confession of Aaftab is going to be enough? My basic question is, do we have enough to nail the murderer as of now?
Well, I'll just take a bit of time here. I'll start from the beginning. I'm not at all happy the way this case is going on. This live-in couple, they moved from Bombay to Delhi, a city where it appears the police system has gone totally haywire. Apparently, that means there is no beat system. There used to be a policy of the Delhi police, like it used to be designated ear and eyes of the police department. It appears their reformers are all gone haywire. And that's why for 6 months, nothing could come out. I'm surprised and shocked why the beat constable couldn't really know about it at an early date, number one. Number two, again, going back to Maharashtra, I'm surprised that Maharashtra police is not cooperating the way they should be. If this person is a criminal, the type of criminal he is, I'm sure it's possible that there might have been a previous incidents in which he might have acted in somewhat similar way, maybe not for this kind of chopping or something, but this kind of aggression or frustration, whatever you call it. And now coming to the point, as on date, the case of the Delhi police is based on nothing but circumstantial evidence, which can't stand in a court of law. They have certain statements, certain papers under Section 161 CRPC, not admissible, talking about narco test, etc., not admissible. I fail to understand why the police is just going in for trying to show to the people. Is it not the media trial that's going on? In fact, they should have been working very carefully about each and everything. I don't believe that even if 6 months have passed, the DNA of the lady wouldn't be there. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. If they tried real hard, I'm sure they can find some DNA stuck up here and there, maybe in the refrigerator or in some corner of the room. Everything can't be washed with, even the bed can't be washed with acid or something, like they say that they washed everything with that. And now, have Delhi police tried to find out where this chopper was, this kind of chopper, like they're saying 1.5 feet, 1.5 feet. I think it's some kind of specialized weapon which is used by butchers and all those things. No, I understand. The police police shouldn't be coming out with what all they have found, but I'm just raising these points. I'm sure that they must have done it, and I hope that they have done it, but I'm just raising these points here. And then again,
a very important point that you made, Mr. Shashikant, is the point of somebody coming, living in a locality, the beat constable system for information not working at all. And Mr. PK Jain, I want to ask you, a beat constable's job was always to know कौन नया आया है कॉलोनी में, कौन नए रेंट पे आया है, क्या करते हैं, क्या नहीं करते हैं. That's the behavioral pattern that used to be followed in the copybook style of policing. I want to ask you, in this case, does it throw up holes in the standard operating procedure of the police and the way they are monitoring the system and be alert to crime before it happens? rather than 6 months after it happens in the national capital, for God's sake?
I'll agree with you 100%. Maybe I'll say 101% I'll agree with you.
Mr. PK Jain.
That's why I said...
Yes, Mr. PK Jain is also coming on that, Mr. Shashikant. Mr. PK Jain.
Yeah, am I audible?
Absolutely
Navika?
audible, loud and clear.
Okay. See, in the old traditional system of the beat policing, etc., does not exist any longer. We do have a police station, we do have beats, the police station is divided into. But if you say that the old system that every constable or the beat constable would be aware of as to what is happening in his beat is probably long lost. The reasons may be many. There are, Mr. Shashikant does not agree with me. Well, I am sitting in a metropolis. It is impossible to find out, the movement of people. The social mobility has increased, the physical mobility because of the jobs, transfers, the families disintegrating has increased a lot. We do our due diligence in certain specific cases, but to say that the policeman would be aware of all that is happening in his area is probably asking for too much. All said and done, we do have a set of informants. We keep getting a lot of information. Cases are worked out on the basis of information. Even today, if you ask me, the system somehow functions. And information comes to the police, information comes to the informants, whomever they are wedded to. Anyway, that's besides the point. I would look at it as a pure and simple serious crime. But there were so many, clues being thrown by the stream of incidents. This girl was not in touch with the parents. She left her home. She moved in this boy. Wherever they had taken the house on rent, they said they had executed a rent agreement in which they had shown themselves as husband and wife. So there was pretty much nothing that anybody would find amiss in this case. A lot of precious time has been lost. 6 months have been lost before this case has been detected. It has now been registered. Investigation has started. But I can draw a very clear parallel of this case with the Sheena Bora case, in which case also the dead body was burned in a different district, and the case was found about 1.5 to 2 years later. And even then the evidence was collected, pieced together, presented in a very coherent manner before the court. So much so that her mother has now got bail after almost 6-7 years. In this case also, it is a very slow moving process. It is a very tedious, laborious thing that the investigating officer will have to go through. He will have to collect the human intelligence in terms of statements of various witnesses, friends, social media,
and
how they interacted with her.
That's where the loopholes will come in. That's where the evidence will be really need to go through a very rigorous test. But Pratibha Prahlad, I want to ask you, the beat constable system, I mean, it's just discontinued. Otherwise, we would have known that Shraddha and, even if they registered a rent agreement as husband and wife, if they lived there, there would be somebody coming in to clean, collect garbage. There would have been some going-ins and going-outs. And, in the earlier days, I remember in Delhi, there used to be a system where everybody needed to verify people who the house was given on rent to, and that needed to be registered with the local police station. Have we just stopped doing all of this, and have we people also forgotten the discipline of all of that, waiting for another Shraddha to go this way?
Navika, I think as cities grew bigger and all kinds of heterogeneous groups got into cities, came from other places, from other parts of India, moved into bigger cities, people just kind of the police just lost their way. Even today, the police says that we have to register our house help with them, with the local, Thana or something, and many don't do it. And we also see that many are victims because they don't register their house help, they live in house help, the domestic servants with, the local Thana. And like you said, I mean, in a situation like this, nobody knows what happened to this girl. Nobody even knows where she went, what happened to her, and nobody has seen her. So they obviously don't have house help. they didn't have a maid, there's no milkman who delivers milk in the morning, and no one in the neighborhood misses this girl for 6 months. I mean, they don't see her coming out of the house, they don't see her getting into the house. So obviously, you know, there's something wrong with our society and with our policing system, and I agree with every word you're saying, because it's a matter of grave concern to every citizen of this country, because, you know, we cannot become isolated little pools living in our own, little homes and hoping that, I mean, not to have interaction with the outside world.
Citizens?
That was the
Are
first
we
emphasis I made.
expecting our law enforcement agencies like the police?
But tell me,
there used to be camps, I remember, for even house help to be registered. Nowadays, nobody even asks you about that. Nobody asks you whether you've registered or not. Your neighbors don't know if a person has been missing from the house for 6 months. It is shocking state of affairs. Whether you look at the police, whether you look at people who give their homes on rent, or whether you look at just citizens. I don't know what kind of a society we've become, but at the same time, is the police really in a position, or will it going to be long and painstaking to build up a case, to get the evidence, to get the results, and to find out just why and just who murdered Shraddha, and will that murderer, if he is Aaftab, the way in which confessions are being put out, will he be punished for it, which will really get some justice for Shraddha? It's a question that sits uneasy right in the middle of our society today. Will it really happen? Can a case be built which is a watertight case? Theoretically, yes, but practically, are you confident? I'm not. And that really makes me extremely uncomfortable. Let's leave it at that as we fight and continue to remind just how justice for Shraddha is so very important for us to have our faith back in our society. Thank you very much to all my panelists for joining me on debate number 1.